Welcome back to Mob Truth, the channel where history's most dangerous secrets come alive. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our family of soldiers. Now let's step into a war that shaped the future of the Mafia. New York, 1931. The Castellammarese War is raging. Joe Masseria on one side, Salvatore Maranzano on the other. Streets run red with blood as gunmen fall in alleys and cafes. But in the middle of the chaos, a young Sicilian watches quietly, learning every move. His name is Joseph Bonanno. And while bosses are gunned down, he is already plotting how to outlive them all. He will survive the war, build his own empire, and be remembered as the last Don. The war between Masseria and Maranzano wasn't fought in boardrooms. It was fought with bullets. Day and night, New York's streets echoed with the stutter of Tommy guns. Men loyal to Masseria prowled Little Italy in the Lower East Side, gunning down anyone they suspected of working with the Castellammarese faction. Maranzano's soldiers answered back just as fiercely, striking in Bronx cafes, Brooklyn alleys, and even in broad daylight outside tenements. Dozens of men were cut down in less than a year. Drivers, lookouts, button men, none were safe. Cars were riddled with holes, storefronts shattered under bursts of fire, and blood ran in the gutters. For the average New Yorker, it was chaos. Newspapers called it the War of the Mustaches, a savage struggle between old-world bosses for control of the American underworld. But behind the gun smoke, one figure was watching carefully. Joseph Bonanno, young, ambitious, and calculating. Unlike the hot-headed triggermen spilling blood on the streets, Bonanno stayed in the shadows, learning which way the tide was turning. Every bullet fired brought him one step closer to a future no one else could see, the chance to build an empire of his own. But behind the gun smoke, one figure was watching carefully. Joseph Bonanno, young, ambitious, and calculating. Unlike the hot-headed triggermen spilling blood on the streets, Bonanno stayed in the shadows, studying every betrayal, every move, every funeral. To the world, he was just another Sicilian immigrant, quiet and unassuming. But inside, he carried the discipline of Castellamare, the old code of honor that demanded loyalty and silence. While Masseria and Maranzano fought for the crown, Bonanno learned how not to die in a war. And in the years to come, that patience would make him something far more powerful than a soldier with a gun. It would make him the last Don. Joe Masseria's empire was crumbling. His men were tired, his allies slipping away, and the city knew he was losing the war. In April 1931, the end came inside a small Coney Island restaurant. Masseria sat at a table, playing cards, never realizing betrayal was already in the room. His own lieutenants, acting under orders from Lucky Luciano, drew their guns. A volley of shots ended the reign of Joe the Boss. The man who once ruled New York with fear now lay slumped over a card game, his cigar still burning beside him. With Masseria gone, Salvatore Maranzano declared himself capo di tutti capi, boss of all bosses. He reorganized the families, handed out titles, and styled himself as the Roman emperor of the American Mafia. For a moment, it looked like victory, and Joseph Bonanno, still young but loyal to his Castellammarese roots, found himself in Maranzano's favor. He was rewarded with trust and responsibility far beyond his years. But Bonanno understood something others did not. Power never lasts. Maranzano's arrogance, his hunger for control, made him enemies fast. Luciano, the same man who betrayed Masseria, now turned his eyes on Maranzano. He saw that the old Sicilian ways would not survive in modern America. And so, within months, another plot was underway. In September 1931, Maranzano summoned Luciano and his closest allies to his office. What he didn't know was that Luciano had already moved first. As Maranzano prepared to have Luciano killed, 4 men disguised as government agents stormed the office. They drew knives and guns, stabbing and shooting until Maranzano lay dead on the floor. Just like that, the boss of bosses was gone, and the old order of the Mafia died with him. Through it all, Joseph Bonanno kept silent, kept patient. While others fought and killed for the crown, Bonanno stayed in the shadows, observing, calculating, preparing for the future. In the chaos of betrayal and murder, he learned the greatest lesson of all. Survival was the real crown, and survival was the gift that would carry him further than anyone expected. Salvatore Maranzano stepped into the silence. He called himself Capo di tutti capi, boss of all bosses, and he meant every syllable. Meetings were held in private rooms under the glow of single bulbs. He spoke softly of order and discipline, of the old Sicilian ways. He loved Roman metaphors, legions, ranks, provinces. New York would have 5 families, each with a boss, underboss, and consigliere. Each would answer to him. The city bent for a moment. Men who had drifted during the war found themselves pulled into orbit again, some by belief, many by fear. Young Joseph Bonanno, the quiet Castellammarese with the watchful eyes, was brought close. Maranzano liked his restraint, his silence, the way he never boasted after a win. He gave Bonanno responsibilities beyond his years, a signal to the old country loyalists that their line still mattered. But power is a jealous thing. The more Maranzano tightened his grip, the more the air left the room. He taxed, he demanded, he sent feelers to neutralize rivals who were supposed to be allies. And in the dim corners of back rooms, another name was whispered, Luciano, with a new idea. No more boss of bosses. A commission instead, where families sat as equals, disputes settled without a crown to cut off. Charles Lucky Luciano worked like a chess player who hated ceremony. He smiled easily, kept his suits perfect, and rarely raised his voice. But the smile hid a clear equation. Maranzano's Rome would lead to another war. So he made calls that never touched the telephone. Allegiances were tested, favors counted, debts called in. Men like these didn't write plans, they breathed them. According to accounts that surfaced later, the scheme was simple and ruthless. Maranzano trusted authority, so authority would be the mask. Agents would visit his office. Government men, he'd think. Papers in hand, badges at the ready. Inside those jackets would be knives and guns, and inside those eyes would be the cold decision that had already killed Masseria. Luciano didn't need a speech. He needed timing. Meanwhile, Joseph Bonanno did what he always did. He listened more than he spoke. He watched who drifted toward Luciano, who clung to Maranzano because they feared the new, who simply wanted the shooting to stop before their sons were old enough to notice. The young man from Castellammarese was taking a private inventory of New York. He didn't know where history would land, but he would land on his feet. September 1931. Maranzano's office, high floors, dark wood, a view that made men feel important. He had called for meetings, issued orders in that smooth, almost priestly tone. He believed he was the center of the wheel, and the spokes would hold. 4 men arrived with the look of authority, hats tipped just so, badges that glanced in the light, the confident hurry of people who don't ask permission to enter. They were shown in. A secretary looked up, felt the chill, and looked down again. The door closed. Knives first. It's quieter that way. Then gunfire to make sure belief didn't outlive breath. Papers fluttered off the desk. A chair crashed. A picture frame shattered. The title Capo di tutti capi died on the tongue of the man who invented it, and with it died the old idea that one crown could rule a city like New York. Outside, traffic moved, unbothered. In back rooms and corner cafes, the news arrived in murmurs that rose to a low roar. It's done. The war had burned itself out at last, not with a treaty, but with a puncture to the heart of the system that caused it. Bonanno's unique edge revised. Joseph Bonanno was different. For 30 years, while other bosses were cut down by bullets, handcuffed by the FBI, or betrayed by their own soldiers, Bonanno walked untouched. He ruled longer than anyone of his generation, and the underworld gave him a nickname no court ever could, the Last Don. Part of his strength came from where he came from. His father in Sicily wasn't a gangster. He was a respected man, even an architect who had worked on the construction of Castellammare's famous bell tower, the Pizza Tower, as locals called it. From his family, Bonanno inherited discipline, respect, and the old world code of silence. He wasn't raised to be reckless. He was raised to endure. In America, that endurance became his weapon. Through prohibition, through wars between bosses, through Luciano's commission, Bonanno sat calmly while others gambled with their lives. And when Luciano reorganized New York, Bonanno was given a permanent place at the table. At just 26 years old, he became one of the founding bosses of the five families of New York, a seat that carried his name for generations. His rivals called him boring, but boring kept him alive. Where others wanted headlines, Bonanno wanted decades, and he got them. By the 1960s, when men like Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, and even Lucky Luciano were long dead, Bonanno was still at the head of his family. Politicians aged out, presidents came and went, but Bonanno remained. The FBI itself admitted, in quiet memos, that Bonanno was the hardest of the five families to penetrate. Informants feared him. Prosecutors could not touch him. For over 3 decades, Bonanno's name never left the seat of power. And then, in a twist no one expected, Bonanno did what no mob boss had ever dared. He wrote a book. In 1983, long retired, he published his autobiography, A Man of Honor. In it, he broke the code of silence, telling his version of mafia history, the wars, the betrayals, the commission itself. For law enforcement, it was a goldmine. For other bosses, it was a scandal. But for Bonanno, it was the final proof that he had outlasted them all. He could afford to speak because there was no one left who could silence him. Even in retirement, he kept a strange sort of dignity. While other families tore themselves apart in the bloody 1970s, Bonanno sat in Arizona, tending his garden, while his legend grew. The government once tried to call him before a grand jury. Bonanno walked in, gave his name, and collapsed with a fainting spell so convincing that they called him Joe Bananas in the press, a nickname he despised. But the fainting worked. He never testified, never gave the government a victory. That was his genius. Bonanno didn't just survive by the gun, he survived by outthinking every enemy he ever had. And in the end, when his enemies were gone, Joseph Bonanno lived to 97 years old. Not gunned down in the street, not stabbed in an office, not dragged into court, but in his bed, in his home, surrounded by family. The mafia had 100 kings, but only one man earned the title, the Last Don. The Bonanno War. For all his patience, even Joseph Bonanno made mistakes. In the 1960s, he tried something no boss had dared before, handing power to his own son, Bill Bonanno. In the mafia, bloodlines run deep, but power isn't inherited like a house or a farm. Other families saw it as arrogance, even weakness. The result was a war that tore his family apart. Bonanno's men loyal to his son clashed with captains who wanted independence. Gunmen stalked Brooklyn and Queens. Cars were riddled with bullets, and for a moment it looked like the city would bleed all over again. In 1964, the FBI tried to seize Bonanno himself, and he vanished. For nearly 2 years, no one knew if he was hiding, dead, or in Sicily. Papers called it the Banana Split, mocking his family name. But inside the mafia, no one was laughing. The commission met in secret, debating whether Bonanno should be erased from the map. When he resurfaced in 1966, he was alive, but weakened. His enemies had grown bold, his family fractured, and yet, even then, Bonanno refused to go quietly. He fought legal battles, survived assassination attempts, and outlasted men who thought they had buried him. Most mobsters are remembered for how they died. Bonanno is remembered for how he lived and how he refused to give in. Even in disgrace, even in exile, he kept the name alive. The family that bore his name never disappeared, never folded. It survived the war, survived government crackdowns, and survives even today. Joseph Bonanno wasn't just another name in the mafia. He was one of the founders of New York's five families, the commission system that still exists today. While men like Luciano and Genovese reshaped the underworld with muscle and ambition, Bonanno carved his legacy with patience and survival. In the 1960s, when his own attempt to pass power to his son Bill sparked the bloody Bonanno War, many thought it would be his end. He vanished for nearly 2 years, leaving the FBI baffled and rival bosses circling like vultures. Yet when he returned, scarred but still standing, it proved what set him apart. Bonanno always found a way back. His enemies feared his silence as much as his soldiers. Captains who betrayed him ended up isolated, while those who stayed loyal outlived the chaos. The FBI admitted privately that Bonanno's family was the hardest to crack, the hardest to turn, the hardest to control. And then came the twist no mobster before him dared. Bonanno told his own story. In 1983, long retired, he published A Man of Honor, pulling back the curtain on mafia wars, betrayals, and the commission itself. Other bosses called it treachery, but Bonanno had already won. He had outlasted the commission, the wars, the betrayals, and the bullets. By the time the book hit shelves, nobody could touch him. He lived not by the gun, but by endurance. From Prohibition to the Cold War to the rise of the FBI, Bonanno stayed alive when others were buried young. He reached 97 years old, dying in his bed, surrounded by family, not on a sidewalk or in a prison cell. Joseph Bonanno wasn't the flashiest or the most feared, but he was the last Don, the man who survived them all. This was another chapter of Mob Truth. Subscribe now and join our family of soldiers uncovering the real stories of the underworld. Until next time, remember, in this world, the truth always walks in the shadows.